I love superheroes! What is up, Flick fans, and welcome back to my channel. I have seen 9 superhero-themed, superhero-centric movies this year, if you will. This is not ranking the comic book movies. This is not ranking movies by certain studios. I'm talking all 9 superhero films that I saw this year, whether it be in a theater, at home, whatever. I want you guys to join along and do this with me. Get down in the comments section. This is your space to talk all things superheroes. Who were your favorite heroes? Who were your favorite villains? What movies do you think were underrated? And I want you guys to know your lists are going to be completely different than my list. Mine is my favorite, not what I think the best were or the most entertaining. There's actually 2 or 3 movies on this list that I gave a higher score than the movie above it, but just that rewatchability factor, which ones I've looked back on and I'm like, oh, maybe I don't like that one as much. And I will say this, 8 out of the 9 movies on this list I gave a positive score to, so I want this to be a celebration of all things superheroes and blockbuster in movies. And if you don't like superhero movies, it's probably not the video for you. But if you haven't seen a lot of these, this could encourage you to go out and see them, because I do think they're all worth watching and deciding whether or not you guys enjoy them. So let's start out with number 9, and I'm not going to take all day. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, and let's get into it. Alright, number 9, if you guys want to know my scores for each film out of 5 stars, click on the link in the description. That is to my Letterboxd page. But let's talk about Venom. Let's talk about Tom Hardy as this character and how the movie itself was slightly disappointing because I wanted something that was a bit more intense. I think the movie being PG-13 was really a detriment to the film, and I know a lot of people love this movie. It made a ton of money at the box office. It was celebrated by audience members. I think those numbers were a bit inflated because like 3,000 of those reviews came before the movie even released in theaters, so it's not like those people saw the film. They just went on IMDb and said 10 out of 10 stars because the trailer was cool. But whatever, I don't look into that. I know there are people that like Venom, my friends in particular, and I'm taking nothing away from you. For me, it wasn't that level that I wanted it to be on. The thing that I loved was Tom Hardy. I want to see him back. I want to see him in every MCU, Sony, whatever movie you want to put Eddie Brock in as Venom with Tom Hardy playing him. I'm okay with that. And there were moments of this movie that made me laugh, I thought were really cool. I think the character of Venom and that relationship between he and the symbiote was great. And I can't wait to see the character again in the future. But as for this movie, it didn't hit me on that level, and some of the dialogue wasn't the best. Number 8, and this film may be on another list if I end up doing the most surprising movies of the year, and I'm not saying I love this movie. I liked it. I thought it was okay, but for me, Teen Titans Go to the Movies, I thought was going to be terrible. I could not stand the show. There are a couple of episodes of the show where I'm like, oh, that's inventive, that's creative. Most of them involve the Teen Titans that I know and love, and of course, nostalgia plays a factor. I grew up with the good one. This is a different spin on the characters, a spin that I did not like before this movie, but I saw the movie, guys, and it completely changed my opinion. I was surprised with how meta it was. It's like a Deadpool for kids, a lot of great jokes, riffing on DC properties and Marvel properties. There's even a great Stan Lee cameo in there. Yeah, Stan Lee cameo. Guys, this movie is absolutely worth a watch. It's one of the better animated movies I have seen this year. You have the original voice cast. You have some great side characters playing superheroes that we know and love. And once again, Nicolas Cage comes in and knocks it out of the park, guys. This movie really surprised me. It's not great, but it's a lot better than I anticipated. And I actually walked out having had a good time. At number 7, we have a movie that I thoroughly enjoyed in theaters, another great entry into the MCU, and just because it's number 7 doesn't mean I didn't like it. I liked Ant-Man and the Wasp. I don't think it's as good as some people were saying. The fact that it had a higher I don't know what it has now, but the fact that it had a higher Rotten Tomatoes score than Avengers Infinity War, I looked at that and I said, no. But whatever, I mean, it was still a fun time. I love Paul Rudd as this character. Evangeline Lilly comes in and kicks all kinds of butt. Their relationship together. I didn't like some of the villainous aspects, and some characters, especially one plot line in particular, really didn't need to be in the movie, but when they're keeping their focus, when they have Michael Peña's character on screen, when the humor hits, it hits hard. I loved seeing Paul Rudd in the house by himself doing all of those activities, and then of course that post-credit scene setting setting up some pretty crazy things in the future. Overall, Ant-Man and the Wasp was a fun time, not my favorite and most memorable superhero experience of the year, but it didn't have to be. It was a nice break from the detriment of Avengers Infinity War. Number 6 and number 5 have switched multiple times on this list. I have only seen number 5 once. I have seen number 6 3 times, and when I first watched it, I gave it a score that is actually higher than the score I gave for number 5. But rewatching it and thinking about it, and just the entertainment factor, I have to put Deadpool 2 at number 6. And that is mostly because I think number 5 is just a different kind of superhero movie, one we've not seen as much of, but that takes nothing away from Deadpool 2. I still thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I think it's a great sequel. I think it did everything that the first one did in the same way, not necessarily a better way. I still like the first one better, but Deadpool 2 is really funny, great meta humor, like I said with Teen Titans. It just does a lot of things that you wanted it to do. It maybe doesn't do things differently and doesn't have the characters that it should have focused on in as much of the movie as you wanted, but Deadpool 2 was still thoroughly enjoyable. I loved Cable, I loved Juggernaut, I loved all of the characters that they introduced, and then seeing the ones that we grew up with basically and loved in the first one, I just thought it was the perfect blend of meta humor and great acting on Ryan Reynolds' part. He once again owned this character. It's not as rewatchable as the first one, and the more I watch it, the more I'm like, well, maybe that's not as good of a movie as I thought it was, but for entertainment purposes, this thing is really, really funny. Number 5, we are going DC once again, and that is Aquaman. Like I said, I gave this a bit of a lower score than Deadpool 2, but after thinking about it and reflecting upon it, I've only seen the movie once. I need to see it again, but this thing was just different. It's a different kind of superhero movie. It mixed sci-fi and fantasy. It was colorful. It's an insane film. It's very self-aware insane, but there are things in this film that I just did not anticipate. There is an octopus playing drums at one part. Like I said, you have to be completely off your rocker, out of the box to make a decision like that, and the entire movie makes it. Now, it tries to be a bit overly epic at times. Sometimes I think it got too cheesy for its own good, but James Wan coming in directing this thing, directing the action scenes flawlessly, bringing an incredible score. I love the score for Aquaman. I have been listening to it. I think it's great. And Jason Momoa as this character. He owns this character. Not the best actor I've ever seen, but he doesn't have to be. He can literally be himself and probably be the best Aquaman we could have gotten. I want to see him again. I want to see a sequel. I want to see him join other characters like he did in Justice League. And Justice League did not do him justice. He was so good as this character in his own movie. And the end, that third act, is just so epic, so colorful, so much CGI, and like 90% of it works super well. And the underwater scenes are really cool. Overall, Aquaman was a good movie. I don't think it's a great film, but once again, the entertainment factor is through the roof. 3 and 4 were just so hard to juggle, and I'm still not confident in my final decision, but let's get into it. Next up, the sequel that I've been waiting on for years, and we had to wait a lot longer than we anticipated, but Incredibles 2 finally dropped in 2018, and my goodness, was it worth it. Let's get my major issue out of the way, and that was the predictability of the villain reveal at the end. I knew the story from beginning to end. As soon as I saw it, I said, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, but you know what? It is a movie that is mainly for kids, and I say that because it will appeal to adults. There are a lot of adult elements in there, but I don't think the target audience necessarily will see that reveal coming, just as I didn't with the original movie and Syndrome. I think it's the same case for this, but that aside, this is one of the most entertaining and thoroughly enjoyable theater experiences I have had all year. Just shaking Madison's shoulder the entire time, saying, oh my gosh, this character's back, and this character's so good, and I love Jack, and I love his interaction with the raccoon, and just the funny scenes, and the subtle humor, and the great characters, and the dialogue, and the conversations. Incredibles 2 delivers on everything you needed it to deliver on. No wonder they took so long. Brad Bird does this movie justice. He can take all the time in the world for the third one. As long as we get it, I'll be happy, and that's why Incredibles 2 is so high up on my list. Next up, we have Black Panther. I loved this movie when I saw it. There are a couple of nitpicks I have with the third act. There's a big CGI battle that I think was too overly CGI, but other than that, I have no major issues with this film because it just balanced epicness and humor, that Marvel humor that we know and love, but just a different style of MCU film. I think Ryan Coogler, as a director, brought so much to this film that would have never been brought to this film if he would not have directed. He just knows he's masterclass in terms of direction, and he brought the cinematography, he brought the incredible soundtrack, my favorite superhero soundtrack of the year so far, and an incredible third act that was full of surprises. The fact that this is still being considered for Oscar nominations is just the best thing ever. If it is truly the first superhero movie to get an Oscar nomination, while it's not my favorite of the year, I do think it is a deserving movie with deserving direction, great performances by Michael B. Jordan, and of course our boy Chadwick Boseman as the man, the myth, the legend himself. Overall, Black Panther was just a cool movie. It delivered, and I cannot wait to see another one. Oh my gosh, guys, this film absolutely blew me away. It blew my socks off. I did not anticipate this being as good as it was, nor did anyone in the world really, but I saw this trailer and I said, yeah, that could be pretty good. But Into the Spiderverse wasn't just pretty good, it's phenomenal. It is incredible. I love this movie so much. It is so good. Every element, aspect, you guys can go watch my review, my spoiler review, my countdown of all of the Spider-Man movies. You guys know I love this film because there is so much in it to love. The style of the animation and the colors. It's a little blurry, your eyes have to get adjusted, but once they do, you will love every element, every character, everything at the forefront. I do think this movie is as good as people are saying. A lot of the times, I think films like this with like a 98 on Rotten Tomatoes, I think they're super overhyped, and I'm like, oh, it's not that good. No. Into the Spider-Verse did something to my comic book Spider-Man loving self that a movie hasn't done in years. It shocked me to my core. You guys can go listen to my podcast where we talk about the Easter eggs. The more I talk about this movie with people, the more I enjoy it, the more I want to go see it. I've only seen it one time, and it's already so high up on all of my lists, not just this list, guys. I love this movie thoroughly. It is one of the coolest comic book movie experiences I have ever had just because it was so much of a surprise. Chris Miller and Phil Lord as the executive producers, they really nailed all of these characters. I love the voice cast. I love Shamik. I love all of it. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, other than a semi-weak villain backstory, but that's it. This movie is almost perfection. The emotional gut punch of this film. Do I even have to talk about, do I even have to mention the name of this movie? Because you guys know Avengers Infinity War affected literally everyone in a different way, but everyone in similar ways, because there are so many stakes in this universe right now. The anticipation for Endgame is there, and it is probably going to be the most highly anticipated films of all time. I think Infinity War was on that level, but now we want to know, and we need to know, what is going to happen with these characters, because what happened in Infinity War set up so many different things, guys. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I didn't just thoroughly enjoy it, I freaking love this movie, man. I love Infinity War. If you don't like it because you think it's a tad bit choppy and it jumps around from storyline to storyline, here's my thing about this movie, and I get it. If you think it's choppy, I get it. If you think it hops around too much, sure. But for me, every story exploration and every storyline, every aspect was so interesting that when it went from one thing to another, I was invested. I was on board. And maybe it's a bit of a cheat code because we've had so many movies to build up love for these characters, and even if you don't love a character, you've still had time to invest into them, so you do care about them, and maybe that in a way is a cheat. But if you are judging this movie for all of those reasons and because you've been so invested in this universe, then I have a right to think Avengers Infinity War is one of the best movies of the year, one of my favorite movies of the year, and it nailed everything a blockbuster needs to nail, and the ending with one of the best villains of all time, in my opinion. And the ending did something different, something no ending to a superhero film has ever done. Regardless of what you think is going to happen in the next film, I have to judge. See, I don't know. Nobody knows, but I don't know. So I have to judge this movie on its own merits. Sure, if the next film comes out and it botches everything and it's horrible, then maybe it will make me like this movie a bit less, but Avengers Infinity War just affected me in a way I can still remember scene by scene what happened in this movie. It could be because I've watched it like 9 or 10 times, but it could also be because it just affected me so much emotionally. And like Chris Stuckman always says, I grew up with the MCU from the first Iron Man until now, so of course it was going to affect me, but it ended up being a great, well-directed, well-shot, a bit too much CGI, but that doesn't matter for me. It's a comic book movie. Guys, I loved Avengers Infinity War. May be overhyped, it may be overrated, but in my opinion, it is one of the best movies of the year. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. This was a thrill, an absolute thrill to make for you. Superhero movies are, I love comic books. I love pop culture. I love the nerd and the geek culture. Everything about that always affects me, and the fact that we're getting these major blockbusters, these animated films, these genre-twisting movies that have superhero elements to them is incredible. And what I want you guys to do, like I said, get down in the comment section. This is your space to talk about everything that you want to talk about, and look forward, because this weekend, my top 10 best, my top 10 worst Netflix films, and then next week, we're doing all of the movies. I have seen over 170 movies this year. I am giving you guys my honorable mentions, my top 10 best, and my top 10 worst. And then, most anticipated for 2019, you guys are genuinely, honestly, the best people, some of the best people in my life right now. Thank you guys for everything. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you want more countdowns, and I will catch you guys later.